I'm a student journalist and student political science student in a Australian university third year. So much of what I talk about, I have experience in. I've experience in doing interviews, sourcing interviews, and conducting interviews personally, and have needed to do so for assessments purposes. So I have experience in writing articles, digital media, and audio journalism. So therefore, as a direct result, the way I would approach this is coming from a perspective of understanding how you frame interview questions itself. Regardless, let us start. Hello. In this video, I'll be covering a video in which I was tagged in, which highlights a key issue in discourse around China and Chinese domestic politics. It will highlight, as I've covered previously before, earlier on, as I will give extracts of, what can happen when journalists abandon being journalists, but rather become attack dogs against the Chinese state. The video in question is Journalist Questions Chinese Ambassador to Australia, Xiao. This one here. This one, I think, should be a watch as well, because it's covered some elements of this dynamics as well, which is kind of interesting. And there'll be some similar themes covered in that and this. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll now get into the scheduled video. For those curious about more details, I won't be covering in this specifically, because I'll be covering more specifically about the journalistic angle and why the reporter failed as reported in this incident. In this talks about far more details into the dynamics around information, stuff around freedom of speech and all of that sort of stuff. So, as a side reading, watch this 11-minute 45-second video after this. Or before. Doesn't hugely matter. It won't impact much of the stuff I will raise up in it itself. So yeah, let's enjoy going over and analysing the questions being asked itself. Let's start with this video itself then, shall we? Let's begin with the very start, playing at normal speed, because there's enough to cover anyway, with the first line of question.
My question is, as a dissident from Hong Kong, knowing that I cannot express freely in Hong Kong or in the UK without risking other people in trouble.
The first layer of the question is, on the surface, kind of fine, at least from her angle. It says a perspective distant from Hong Kong, UK laws, yada.
I also know that you just now made claims about there's free speech in China.
Then adding in as accusatory claim, making claims about freedom of speech in China.
And it's possible to criticize the Chinese government just now again. Can you please demonstrate that free speech and tell us what are Xi Jinping's two worst mistakes in the...
Therefore, then linking to a point of trying to add a point of discreditation and or proving the point. More so discreditation by her later attitudes shown, which I will highlight.
The past 5 years.
Great question.
And this is where the first blunder of the journalist kicks in. He kicks in by saying, good question, in relation to the dynamics here, by saying, what is the biggest two mistakes of Xi Jinping in the last 5 years? Then pointing the finger directly at him. I'm describing this as well, so if you're just like an audio-only person, you can understand what's going on. And then saying, great question in relation to a obviously dog whistle attack.
If you can demonstrate to us that it's okay to criticize Xi Jinping, the Chinese government, and China, or even just say Xi Jinping kind of resembles Winnie the Pooh, will be good enough for me. Thank you.
That is the first major red flag shown in this operation, because it basically highlights how this whole starts with a disingenuous nature. And as a direct result of that, it leads to a disingenuous conclusion. Here we are, with another case study here, covered in this video. The first example was that of basically a separatist wanting to try and do a gotcha statement on Victor Gao. This is now a point where the first line of dodgy questioning exists.
With Taiwan. You are a country of 3.7 million square miles, a population 60 times that of Taiwan, economy 20 times the size of Taiwan. Why are you obsessed with Taiwan? Why not just leave them be?
Now we get to the point of the Taiwan question. Let's analyze this whole question thing. So I'll play it back for 2 seconds, just so you can get a better understanding of it. Now you have the full question. I will break down the point.
And why this obsession with...
And why this obsession is as to basically try and point out that Victor Gao is fundamentally delusional, or basically the aggressor in the matter.
With Taiwan. You are a country of 3.
Then saying with Taiwan, you as a country as to placate legitimacy and trying to placate politeness in a more superficial manner.
0.7 million square miles, a population 60 times that of Taiwan, economy 20 times the size of Taiwan.
And for those who will say that the use of Taiwan here is complex, okay, there's 2 ways you can mention Taiwan. You mention one, Taiwan shorthand, Taiwan province or Taiwan region. So Taiwan, the shorthand of that. Or you have those who advocate for Taiwan as a country using the word Taiwan. So I don't know which one it is for him, but I would think it's more so he's more on the side of Taiwan as a country. But the point is that the dynamics here is that the question itself implies a natural end conclusion that China is in the wrong in its natural of the outcome, dooming the answer itself to a more aggressive outcome.
Why are you obsessed with Taiwan? Why not just leave them be?
As said by the conclusion of the question. Why are you obsessed with Taiwan? Why can't you just leave them be? That itself, said in that exact tone and nature, basically makes any objectivity of it rendered useless. Given I am going to actually attack the questioning, I will provide a alternate solution. So let's say then you ask it this way instead. I will make it up on the spot. Given that China, I will use the exact same stats and numbers he used in this to rephrase the question. Given that China is 20 times the economy of Taiwan and vastly superior in landmass, why is the efforts of the Chinese government so focused on the integration or potentially, as per your guidelines under the one China policy, forceful reunification of China itself? What is dare to prevent any legitimate rights of Taiwan as its own separate entity existing within the domestic politics of China. And that is an example of what is in play here. What could be posed as a neutral question is posed as an aggressive sort of question. Let's move into the next question itself, shall we?
In terms of defending China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, any inch of land is not 1 inch too much. Any one single person is not one person too many. So we need to achieve reunification as
Even though they don't want to be.
And this is the point in which the conflicts start to happen, where the poor questioning itself and the antagonism with the reporter starts to have its impact. They ask for the official position. The official position was stated. And now let's look at the actual response of the journalist to that.
not 1 inch too much. Any one single person is not one person too many. So we need to achieve reunification as
Even though they don't.
As you can see here, not letting him finish his speech and going on this little tirade about
Want to be part of your country. 12% of the people of Taiwan say they want to reunify with China. 12%. You can't get more unpopular than that in that.
Mehdi, it's not up to the people in Taiwan to decide about the one China policy.
You're free.
as you can see here, right? Let's go back into that just so you can break it down more.
They don't want to be part.
But they don't want to be part. But they, that's why I said it's more so supporting Taiwan as a country in terms of the word Taiwan, because the word they would imply as a country not wanting it.
Part of your country. 12% of the people.
But under any case, though, even 12% is enough. Just because if there's 12%, that means it's not a futile endeavour at all by the policy itself. So it's a case in point of like argument on popularity sort of logic here, when there's in fact a lot of evidence going on that a lot of the actual opinions and stuff about reunification or even pro-Kuomintang things have been suppressed by the separatist medias and groups within Taiwan.
People of Taiwan say they want to reunify with China. 12%. You can't get more unpopular than that in that.
So, let's get to the proper phrasing. If then, let's say, the territory of stuff like that argument, let's again work with what he's working with. Instead of having the emotional outburst response there, have a more appropriate response by saying, for example, of course, allowing him to finish the sentence, and then say, Isn't it also the case that 12% of the population within the territory of Taiwan also does support? Okay, let me phrase it. Isn't it also that only 12% of the people in the territory of Taiwan have support for that consensus? So how then would you respond to that dynamic? For example, the response in his case, being what it is due to the very emotional outbursts of the interviewer.
say they want to reunify with China. 12%. You can't get more unpopular than that in that.
Mehdi, it's not up to...
And that's where the point of it's not up to the people to decide. A comment basically happens in this case because of the very much case of popularity argument being pushed by Mehdi in this situation. That is where the situation starts to impact things, and that's why the hyper-emotional and more pro-separatist line of thinking in the questioning is a negative impact. Continuing on then, let's keep going and let's keep talking about the video.
Mehdi, it's not up to the people in Taiwan to decide about the one China policy.
You're very blunt in your disregard for people's views, freedoms.
And this is where the point of where this, as a journalist, gets really irresponsible. Because when he goes on this rampage, because by technicality, right, he's talking to someone who is very much in tune with domestic Chinese politics, right? So therefore, as a direct result, the answer of this,
about the one China policy.
You're very blunt in your 12%.
Mehdi,
you can't get more unpopular than that in that.
Mehdi, it's not up to the people in Taiwan to decide about the one China policy.
That response there, right? Then for the emotional outburst that follows is completely redundant because it basically shows he has no control of the situation.
You're very blunt in your disregard for people's views, freedoms, dignity. You say
by saying you're very blunt about your open disregard for it makes it an emotional outburst, which may look good for ratings and for a invested crowd. But in terms of like talking to your interview subject itself, it makes you look like a blundering idiot, which does not fare well for like any other serious questions you have going forward, if that is your approach.
You don't care about what they think. You also said in an interview with the French newspaper Le Monde, once we get the island back, we'll have to ask everyone's origins. Those who have Japanese ancestry, who you basically say can constitute 10% of the population, will have to pledge loyalty to reunification in writing. Otherwise, we'll have to help them leave. You're basically calling for the ethnic cleansing of 2.3 million people in Taiwan.
No, you remember.
See what happened there, right? They took something which was not most likely referring to ethnic cleansing at all, than saying ethnic cleansing. In reality, it will probably be something more like loyalty tests in Hong Kong to make sure you're loyal to the actual country itself and not just to foreign powers.
Remember back in 1945 when Japan unconditionally surrendered, a lot of people in Taiwan who originally came from Japan, they were the rulers of Taiwan at the time, they stayed behind because of the magnanimity of the Chinese nation. Now, several decades later, they account for about 10% of the local population in Taiwan. Now, if you really do your homework, you will realize that those die-hard Taiwanese separatists include many of these Japanese Chinese.
But okay. Well, but you would get rid of them.
Did you notice that snide thing there, right?
Your homework, you will realize that those die-hard Taiwanese separatists include many of these Japanese.
Do you see that? See that? You see here how when going over the stats, history, and talking about the separatist stuff, which is what is relevant to the topic. Again, this is still talking about Taiwan, so separatism is fine. So, therefore, as a direct result, this is completely baseless. Basically then is a tactic to now basically say that Victor Gao's point is rendered useless and he's a liar.
Taiwanese.
But okay.
Well,
but
we
you
can-
would get rid of them. You would get rid of 2.3 million people.
No, after the reunification, everyone in Taiwan need to make a pledge. Whether they acknowledge there is only one China and Taiwan is part of China.
And if they don't make that pledge, they're out.
Those who pledge
Wow.
for the one China.
Also another notice. The very much wow response there when the actual policy is trying to be explained highlights the open disrespect of the journalist in question.
China policy, they are local.
By the way, you didn't say
And therefore, as a result, this happened actually a lot in this. Victor Gao cannot finish any statement properly without him interrupting. I will go into that now.
everyone. You said of Japanese descent. That is literally ethnic. Like you're picking people by their ethnic heritage, making them do a loyalty test. Otherwise, they have to get out of the country.
It is not a loyalty test. Here, for example, in Britain, if you are a British citizen, you need to support the monarchy. You cannot say, I'm
standing in Britain. I don't support the monarchy. I don't like King Charles.
No, you cannot say. No,
I just said it.
But at the same time, the same thing applies in China. You can literally say you don't like the Communist Party, and it's the exact same rules. But if you try like a terrorist plot to basically destroy either the parliament or the monarchy, you're gonna get your ass beaten, arrested, or killed. The same like if you try to take over state power in China. So it's the exact same standard.
Mehdi,
I literally just said it.
You cannot take any action to oppose the monarchy system.
But I don't have to sign a pledge saying I support King Charles.
Well, each country is different.
Yeah,
we are talking about China.
China is very.
As you can therefore see so far, the nature of the interview itself has its unique nature to it. Its characteristic and dynamic has its impact within it. So much so that from now onwards, it's going to get far worse in dynamics between each phase and count anything beyond this point as the state and point of where what is semi-respectable gets not so much. And the questioning gets far, far worse going forward to the point that, quite frankly, the interviewer itself, he's asking for the shit he's going to get from this because his terrible questioning.
If anyone is serious about accusing China of practicing mass injustice to the Uyghurs, give me the evidence. I think
Human Rights Watch say 500,000 people detained over the years in recent years.
And this is another point in which the use of NGOs itself has been weaponized, because Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, and all those other groups have a bias towards them, in which doesn't account for much. So the point of objection here will be used by the interviewer to try and weaponize a antagonistic attack against him. What happened?
The United Nations Office for Human Rights looked at satellite footage. They say 10 to 20% of the population. Amnesty estimates 1 million people in camps. 500,000 is a conservative number.
Mehdi, if you quote that organization, please be assured that organization has been completely discredited for the false information they come up with.
I love this game we're playing. You give.
And this is where the interviewer itself then had here a legitimate opportunity to approach this thing. So let's approach this differently, right? If you've got that thing facing you, right, would you then say that? Would you then maybe think more smartly about it? I would play it first and then go from there.
for the false information they come up with.
I love this game we're playing. You give me a source, I give you a source. They're discredited. They've said falsehoods.
Many.
How can let me ask you a question. How many people are in detention in Xinjiang? You give me a number.
And this approach to it is a bad approach because Victor Gao by no means can know the true number if there is any at all, and he knows that, most likely. What he wants is to say he can't know, so there can be a standard as to give credential support towards the sources he has, so therefore yada 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 yada. Therefore, as a result of that, it makes a system of where it makes Victor Gao look like the person who's in the wrong. And that is on purpose. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. If anything, it's a point in which Victor Gao tries to deal with this situation in a decent way by trying to, by literally trying to potentially, if he wanted to, go to those areas itself, but that's now another issue entirely, in which will be brought up. So let's continue.
Listen, if you look at Xinjiang,
you give me a number.
As you can see here again, what's more, interrupting you will respond.
If you look at, I do not have the number.
Why not?
And of course he doesn't have a number because I already have a number because that's obvious.
Yeah.
Hold on. You can't say it's
And this is where the counter-attack begins by saying,
not 500,000 and then say you don't have a number. I have a number. I have sources. How many people do you think are detained?
Let me give you.
But that's not how it works here. The point was that if the point, let's again work back in this situation, just so you understand what the hell's going on here. Victor Gao said the sources of stuff were not credible as valid sources of information, which I do tend to agree with, especially with Amnesty International, because they support dodgy people. Whatever. But the point is, it went to the point of asking, like, okay, then how many? Victor Gao? Oh, I don't know. Next. Then led to the point of saying, well, if you don't know, and if the sources say these numbers, that means the sources are right. That is exactly what's going on here. The way to approach this in question would be then, rather than his approach of trying to create a standard to just basically create a artificial acceptance in the eyes of the viewers' ratings, say this instead. If you consider then that the Amnesty International itself stuff has no credibility in terms of sources, what sources would you then consider as having valid or justifiable sources to numbers or accreditations?
My reason.
No.
I go to Xinjiang a lot. I travel almost
So they're your brothers and sisters.
Xinjiang.
You go there a lot, but you
Yes.
can't tell me how many people are in detention.
Listen,
How do you know that anyway? That's not his primary field of things. That'd be primarily a either security bureau concern with the that or local government concern, not necessarily his concern. So expecting him to know it is a bit asking a bit too much.
they are happier. They enjoy their life. They enjoy their Muslim practices and traditions. Listen,
How many people are in detention, Victor?
And this is what I mean. The very fact that people have lives, are safe, and are happy is not enough. The very point of pandering to the point of numbers being detained so you can have something to use as an attack dog. Methodology is impactful here because if you have a numbers and the numbers methodology to attack them with, that therefore means that, as a direct result, it means that you can then discredit anything they say by saying, but X numbers detained or X numbers killed. Even though there's, for some of them, a very genuine reason for them being detained. Because Xinjiang itself has had a told history regarding extremism and terrorism, and quite literally after effects of the Mujahideen and the Taliban in Afghanistan. So, yeah.
Mehdi, let me be philosophical.
No, don't be philosophical. Be numerical.
No.
How many people are in detention? You said no to 500,000. How about, okay, let's let 250,000.
Let me finish my point.
Nope.
This is what I mean. This is exactly what I mean. Victor Gao is not the person in any means of direct control or communication with Xinjiang security forces numbers or anything like that. And this is what I mean. Anything mentioned here is being basically shut down. By then, this response here to basically create an issue by saying no. That basically means, and I think Victor Gao says about the actual advancement of life in Xinjiang is being rendered useless because he needs a number of victims so they can say 250,000, 500, or 1 million. As number of victims, then plaster Victor Gao denies the X number of people potentially, or whatever. That's the core point of what's going on here. Continuing on, and as you can see, it's a complete clusterfuck of a video, and that's due to the interview himself being hyper-aggressive and now literally no longer being a rational reason. I know he's trying to do the heat, put on the heat sort of thing to try and fight for justice and equality, but it's really not coming off that way. It's really making things worse.
If
you answer the question. You can't filibuster, Victor, on the show.
Anyone
how many
promotes
people do you think
independence, they will be dealt with in
Got it. How many of them are in court? How many in detention?
The very small minority.
So you don't have a number. You say they're all happy, but you won't let in independent investigators. You won't let in journalists to go there.
Why not?
They're not allowed to go there.
I will be happy to escort you to Xinjiang.
Really?
And as I said here, I'll previous point. Journalists and others are allowed in Xinjiang.
I can make that promise.
Really?
I will speak to the Chinese government.
Here's the problem.
To the Chinese
I don't want to
embassy.
escort.
And this is where the problem with journalists is. And here's the problem. I don't want an escort. You know what that's code for, ladies and gentlemen? That's code for, I want a means to make shit up and have no accountability. Yeah. Because nothing goes wrong when certain media personalities who are hostile to China goes into the areas and wants to report about the affairs, right? Of course not. No. Fucking no. Of course there's an issue of it. He doesn't understand the issue here. There's a long history now of misinformation about regions in China now, so there's a lot more, assurances that he can't lie openly about those regions.
I don't want minders. I want to go freely. Will you allow that?
I don't want minders. I want to go freely. But this is the thing. Given your previous line of questions, what sane official would even accept you in under those conditions? Because under that guidelines, you're only going to slander them anyway. So Why on earth would they let you in without any minders?
That?
I do not make that decision.
Oh, a moment ago you were going to make all sorts of interruptions. Suddenly I said, let me go freely and speak to Uyghurs freely. Can I do that with no minders?
I'll be
No
happy.
Chinese government
What he doesn't understand in this situation is this. Victor is a Chinese citizen. He can go at any time. This person isn't. So of course he can't. If you're going to be there as a foreign journalist as well, there's other considerations as well. He's just being totally self-centered and selfish in this situation, which is where he wants, which is where a lot of the arrogance of a lot of certain reporters comes in. They feel they have a right to know, I think, and while to a certain extent, reporters should have a certain self-confidence to them in certain things. This is where it gets a bit on a more imperialistic end of things.
escort.
I will be happy to make your case.
Oh, just now you said you'd organise it. Now we're back. Make a case.
Well, yes, you make a case, so you're permitted in, and then you and Victor Gao can go in together. That's how it works. This reporter is an idiot who doesn't know how this shit works, so what do you expect?
You can't guarantee. I said Rishi Sunak was called a pint-sized loser. Would you call Xi Jinping a pint-sized loser?
Mehdi, each country has different sensitivities. In UK,
So you're admitting you can't criticize the Chinese government?
No. You can criticize the government if you are positive in attitude.
You can criticize the government if you're positive?
Yes.
Is that the new philosophy?
No, if you can come up with your...
You've got to come up with nice insults?
No.
What then?
And this is where the will dynamic is showing, right? His tone here and his demeanor here is basically showing he is no shit for the actual opinions of Victor Gao, officially. And it gets way worse than this. He basically shits on Victor Gao far more going on in this situation, to the point where it gets absolutely absurd, and where it would have been completely reasonable for Victor Gao to just bail midway and just leave. Because quite frankly, some of the stuff he says in this is completely absurd. For example, let's just look at this snark comment again.
Positive in attitude.
You can criticize the government if you're positive?
Yes.
Is that the new philosophy?
No, if you...
And this is where where his complete lack of research into things is showing. If he researched things, he would know the actual reality of things, therefore would know that, yes, you can criticize government.
You can come up with your...
You've got to come up with nice insults?
And therefore, by saying, oh, what, you're just going to come out with nice insults? Is missing the whole point entirely. The point here is that if you are going to critique, have it be meaningful and not slander. Critique itself is fine, just don't be slanderous.
No.
What then?
Constructive advice.
Constructive advice?
For example,
oh, I'm loving
in
this.
dealing with the aging population, what should be the government do? What should this governor should do?
But you can't say the president's lied. He's a liar.
Not the UOB.
What? No suggestion, you need to prove it. If you want to just randomly accuse the president of being a liar, you need to actually physically prove it. That's the thing. And this is where a lot of the... Sorry, let me correct my quickly. Where a lot of the sensibilities of some people vanish when they fall into this pipeline of absolute delusion. If you honestly think the only way to do things is by constantly slandering? Well, I hate to break it to you, the way the UK works and the way China works is entirely different. I'm sorry. Sorry. I'll repeat that if the mic stopped functioning for 2 seconds. The way the UK government works and the way the Chinese government works is different. The forms of democracy itself functions in 2 different formats. There is consultative democracy and there is combative democracy. Within the UK, it works. Of course, the UK, I use the UK one because that's often the one which for much of my system and much of the Canadian system as well to some extent. So it works in a very similar way. Where basically it's more aggressive in its competition, therefore leading to the end result, naturally speaking, that, well, what happens there is you bash each other, get political insults to each other, and try and gauge power from each other to advance their own power as a party. To work in alliances or to destroy the power of others. Consultative democracy functions extremely differently in this context because consultative democracy itself is not a system in which that's not really. I mean, can you still contest there is? Of course you can, but it's like the whole core point of consultative democracy is that you work within a more dynamic in which you actually advance the whole itself, and you advance the system and the country going forward as a whole. Not just have your personal feelings govern the politics and then have it imposed on the people and have people just have to suck it up and deal with it. Let's then link to this point here just to end it all from this point, because honestly there's a whole rant about other bullshit which is totally irrelevant to grand scheme of things, but not worth talking about. So let's begin. The point here now will be about the dissident point.
My question is, as a dissident from Hong Kong, knowing that I cannot express freely in Hong Kong or in the UK without risking other people in trouble, I also know that you just now made claims about there is free speech in China, and it's possible to criticize the Chinese government just now again. Can you please demonstrate that free speech and tell us what are Xi Jinping's 2 worst mistakes in the past 5 years?
Great question.
If you can demonstrate.
And this is the lead up to it. And therefore, as you can now see, we're moving back to this as a definite result. Therefore, the collect question thing combined with a whole bunch of other stuff we've seen before there, with the complete total disregard towards Victor Gao, has been present.
Demonstrate to us that it's okay to criticize Xi Jinping, the Chinese government, and China, or even just say Xi Jinping kind of resembles Winnie the Pooh would be good enough for me. Thank you.
Victor, do you want to take that question?
Well, thank you. I would say China need to take more prompt actions in dealing with the dramatic aging population in China and the dramatic demographic decline.
Do you think Xi Jinping's to blame for not being fast enough on aging?
No, I think the whole Chinese government, including the Central Committee, State Council, local government, need to take actions quickly to reverse that dramatic aging population problem and demographic decline.
And that's another interesting point shown there, right? How answering the question therefore, which is a genuine question, genuine answer. Aging population, yada 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 yada, and that is partially true. A lot of some people in the Communist Party of China themselves do need to update to some things, That's very much true. And that's where the folly of the interviewer and his true colours was once more showing, where Victor Gao was saying that some even research committee need to get the answers more together and their shit together, obviously, which is a fair comment to say in some things. If they are generally lacking, sure. But the point is, by the insinuation then of trying to blame it on GCP, that itself means that it is basically a case in point where it says, as a reporter, he does not care or give a shit about the actual answers. As you can say right there, right? Victor Gao said the Asian population is an issue of the party itself which need to evolve in. Cool. Not an issue. And there came in the reporter saying, but GCP, again, because that would get much, much better results in traction. If you can get the leader attacked, it's better for your visuals, it's better for your headline, because then you can put a nice little picture of Xi Jinping or the Chinese military in the background by saying Xi Jinping abandons China or whatever. I'm completely being sarcastic, as you can probably tell, but that's besides the point. But I'm not that far off, because people use alternate titles for alternate things to basically say the same fucking thing.
I'm going to get a criticism out of you. Tibet, after 74 years of Chinese rule.
Here we go. And then we got this case here, study of another case.
Still under lockdown. No journalists, no individual tourists, even Tibetans are not allowed to see their families. What is China afraid of to keep Tibet in such a tight control and Tibetans in such an inhuman existence in our own country?
Tibet being part of China.
Two issues there. And I can tell, and of course you've seen if you know how Victor Gao is going to respond, and of course, okay. The very premise of the question itself, at least by the end, made it that he's not going back to Tibet. If someone still thinks that Tibet is still a country, well, why would they be allowed back in? Why the hell would separatists be allowed back in, especially after there was previous issues with separatists trying to cause shit and even starting an uprising attempt? I'm just saying.
Now, it doesn't depend on whether you like it or not. It's a megatrend of our time.
A megatrend.
And you need to accept that before you will feel free to go back to China.
So you don't
visit Tibet.
You sound like you're threatening the man.
No, I'm not.
You said you have to accept that before you can go back.
Oh, I see something there. Didn't see before. I see that little pin there. Fascinating. That either means he's either a Free Tibet supporter or part of the Tibetan exile community, which means definitely not so much. Not going to give me at the back. In any case, let's go back just so we can go over what's covered.
Free to go back to China.
So you don't
visit Tibet.
You sound like you're threatening the man.
And therefore, as a direct result, of course, the journalist once more is going into the case in point of trying to insinuate something that is happening that isn't happening to try and get a response. Was it a threat? No. Because is Tibet part of China? Yes. The person audience has his conflict of interest because he himself has a Tibetan exile pin, or he's either a Free Tibet activist supporter or someone who supports the Free Tibet cause itself in general. Therefore, as a direct result of that, it means, voila. Of course, naturally speaking, there's going to be conflict between Victor Gao and the Tibetan separatist.
No, I'm not.
You said you have to accept that before you can go back. He's from that place.
You live in peace in Britain, that's good.
But he's a refugee.
But if you want to go back to Tibet, acknowledge Tibet is part of China, period.
And what if he doesn't? He can't go back to his home.
You cannot go back.
Yeah, that's correct. If you don't accept Tibet is no longer a country and it's no longer under the conditions it was under the Dalai Lama, yeah, of course he can't come back. That's obvious.
Because China doesn't want to see anyone advocating for the independence of Tibet.
Why can't
No
China...
way. That will never
Victor,
happen.
why can't China rest on its own merits?
And here we go. Another point. But Victor, why can't China rest on its own merits? Well, the issue with the separatist was he is a separatist. There's literally anti-separatist laws in China. So, was he really expecting Victor to go against national laws and say like, oh, doesn't matter, just go in anyway, it will be fine? When you have no idea if the person has good intention or bad intention, to go in pushing like separatist propaganda about Tibet is its own country and should resist, what that result in? That will result in another incident, potentially, which will affect people's lives. And would you want to happen? Of course not. Therefore, the policy is so. But then the response, therefore, is not, oh, can't it rest on its own merits? That's not the correct way to respond to this. I'll let it finish and then I'll give a alternate response.
Why the bullying and the threats? We're going to break you to pieces, Taiwan. You can't go back until you sign this document or that declaration. Why the insecurity? Second biggest economy in the world, major power. You sound so insecure.
China's security rests on the principle that there is only one China. And Taiwan is part of China, Tibet is part of China, and Xinjiang is part of China, period.
And even if the people there don't want to be part of it, you don't give a damn.
The majority of the people live happily as Chinese
How do we know?
citizens.
Did you do a vote?
I will go with you to Tibet.
We're going to go to...
And of course, going back to this joke here and there. Of course, then, if he was a serious interviewer in this situation, he would maybe then say, like, what could be done then within reason to maybe potentially change this policy or direction within the Chinese government?
To Tibet, and we're going to talk to all the Tibetans.
And possibly
I
also
can go to Tibet,
Taiwan.
but the guy who's from there can't go there. You sound ludicrous when you say this stuff. I'm sorry. Victor, before we finish, I have one question for you. We're in the UK. We're in Conway Hall, historic free speech society. Could we do a show like this? Could I interview you like this? Could Rehan come be on a panel like this in Beijing, in, say, the Beijing International Convention Center? Can we do a show like this? Audience members freely ask questions. You take questions from everyone. No one's vetted. No one's threatened. Could we do this in Beijing?
Mehdi, if you ask me to line up all the support, you will do that. Really, I can assure you that.
A show where every audience member gets to speak freely. No one turns up at their house afterwards.
For many European countries, you do not need a visa to go to China. Pick up your luggage
No, I'm
and
not
buy
asking,
a ticket.
I'm not asking
Fly to
foreigners.
Beijing.
Victor, I'm not asking foreigners to come. I'm saying, could a Chinese audience turn up and ask whatever they want, criticize Xi Jinping, criticize the government, ask you questions, talk about Uyghurs?
But the question is that practical? I know it's trying to do a hypothetical to try and prompt something about the spirit of free speech and democracy. But seriously, is it practical? Practicality beats everything else in this context.
Could you do it in Beijing?
Really, in China, don't criticize our president.
So we couldn't do this.
Unless you
Well, I'm
have
glad you answered the
a very
question.
positive, constructive proposal to make.
From the
Criticism
horse's
is not
mouth. Don't criticize unless it's
criticism
positive.
is not the only goal. Criticism.
And alas, there you go. Another proof positive of everything here. Don't criticize unless you are positive. But that's not what Victor Gao said. If people then took his words absolutely, when Victor Gao was, as you heard, here was, don't criticize president unless you have positive intent. Basically, with like an actual proposal. Which seems fair enough. Seems perfectly fair enough. If you have an idea, just propose it with the appropriate research backing and all that sort of stuff, and maybe something can happen from it.
With constructive
speech
purposes
is a goal.
will be a better free speech.
Free speech is a goal we cherish on this show. I'm glad to have offered you a platform for speech.
I'm going to end it here, at least for this video segment, and I'll do my final concluding thoughts afterwards.
So let's make our concluding thoughts, shall we? As you can see here, the arrogance in terms of the interviewer itself was really much showing. I, of course, cut some elements out because that would have taken way too long to go over, elaborate, and explain. But rest assured, it was nothing particular. It was just the usual rantings about terms, Xi Jinping, and all that sort of shit. So, that's all it was. So, at the end of the day, it's a case in point of, as you can see, if you got to this point, you're basically seeing most of the elements of it, which is relevant, and the pure aggression coming from the side of the interviewer was intense. And that is a sign that, as the interview goes, he basically was not really giving much due to the actual realities of the interview itself. He messed up the opportunity to get actual good answers, rather using it as a stage to essentially do a character assassination move on Victor Gao. And with that, I am signing off, and I hope you learned something from this episode.